Growing up, my grandfather always told me that land was the one thing they couldn't make more of. I never truly understood what he meant until I inherited his 15-acre farm that sits on the outskirts of Willow Creek Estates, one of those fancy suburban developments where everyone's lawn has to be exactly 2.5 inches tall. I'm Alex Thompson, 35, and this is the story of how an HOA president completely lost her mind over my private property. The whole mess started on a crisp October morning. I was out in the barn, fixing up my grandfather's old tractor, when I heard the distinct sound of expensive heels clicking against the gravel driveway. Now, living next to a suburban development, I'd gotten used to the occasional neighbors stopping by to ask about buying fresh eggs or complaining about my rooster's morning routine. But this was different. Standing there in a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly feed bill was Victoria Blackwood, the newly elected HOA president of Willow Creek Estates. Her perfectly styled silver hair and artificial smile reminded me of those real estate agents you see on late-night TV infomercials. "Mr. Thompson," she called out, maintaining her distance from anything that might dirty her designer outfit. "I'm Victoria Blackwood, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Do you have a moment to discuss an exciting community initiative?" I wiped my hands on my work jeans and walked over. "Ma'am, I appreciate the visit, but my farm isn't part of your HOA. Never has been, never will be." That picture-perfect smile didn't falter one bit. "Oh, I'm well aware. But you see, we're launching a wonderful new program. The Community Gardens Initiative. Your property would be perfect for bringing our residents together through the joy of gardening." I couldn't help but notice how her eyes kept darting past me, scanning every inch of the property like she was mentally redecorating. "With all due respect, Mrs. Blackwood, this is a working farm, not a community garden. I've got livestock, crops, and dash—" "Please call me Victoria," she interrupted, taking a step closer. "I understand your concerns, but imagine the possibilities. We could start small, maybe just an acre or two. Our residents would love to learn about farming from someone with your rustic expertise." The way she said rustic made it sound like she was describing something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Again, I'm not interested. This is private property, and I intend to keep it that way." That's when I saw it, the first crack in her polished veneer. Her smile tightened just a fraction, but her eyes, they turned cold as winter. "Mr. Thompson, I don't think you understand the opportunity here. The HOA will be willing to compensate you, of course, and having our backing could be very beneficial for you." Before I could respond, a sleek black SUV pulled into my driveway. A young woman, probably in her early 20s, stepped out. "Mom, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." The wedding planner's been calling nonstop. And that's when everything clicked. Victoria's daughter, Amelia, was a carbon copy of what her mother must have looked like 25 years ago. Same perfectly styled hair, same expensive taste in clothes, but with a genuine warmth her mother lacked. "Amelia, darling, I'm in the middle of a meeting," Victoria said through gritted teeth. "Oh my God, Mom. Is this the farm you're talking about? It's perfect. The barn would be amazing for the reception, and that meadow would be absolutely gorgeous for the ceremony. Can you imagine the photos at sunset?" I cleared my throat. "I'm sorry, what?" Victoria shot her daughter a look that could have frozen hell over. "Amelia, please wait in the car." But the cat was already out of the bag. This wasn't about community gardens or bringing neighbors together. Victoria Blackwood wanted my farm for her daughter's wedding venue. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said firmly, "let me be crystal clear. My farm is not for rent. Not for gardens, not for weddings, not for anything. This is my home and my livelihood." "Mr. Thompson," she stepped closer, dropping her voice. "Everyone has a price. Name yours." I can still remember exactly how the autumn wind picked up at that moment, rustling through the maple trees my grandfather had planted decades ago. "Ma'am, my grandfather taught me that some things aren't for sale. This farm is one of them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." I turned and walked back to the barn, but not before hearing Victoria's sharp whisper to her daughter, "Don't worry, sweetie. He'll come around. They always do." Looking back now, I should have known those words were a declaration of war. Victoria Blackwood wasn't used to hearing, no, and she sure as hell wasn't about to start accepting it from some rustic farmer who stood between her and her daughter's perfect wedding. But my grandfather taught me something else too, that the best fertilizer is a farmer's footsteps. This was my land, my home, and I was about to find out just how far an entitled HOA president would go to get her way, and just how badly it would backfire on her. Little did I know. This was just the beginning of a 3-month nightmare that would end up making local headlines and changing Willow Creek estates forever. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a bright pink paper tucked into my mailbox. A notice from Willow Creek Estates HOA, citing me for unauthorized agricultural activities in a residential zone. I had to laugh. My farm predated their development by almost 60 years. But Victoria Blackwood was just getting started. It began with whispers. Neighbors who used to stop by for fresh eggs suddenly became scarce. One evening, my longtime customer Patricia Walsh, a retired teacher from the development, finally told me what was going on. "Alex, I thought you should know," she said, nervously glancing over her shoulder. "Victoria's been telling everyone your farm is a health hazard. She claimed your runoff is contaminating the community's groundwater and that you're running an illegal business without proper permits." I thanked Patricia for the heads up, but I wasn't too worried. I had all my permits in order. My grandfather had taught me well. What I didn't expect was what came next. One crisp November morning, I caught a real estate agent leading a young couple across my backfield. When I confronted them, the agent's response left me cold. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Victoria Blackwood assured me this property was being annexed into the development. She said you were selling and it would be available for new construction by spring." My blood boiled. Victoria wasn't just spreading rumors, she was actively trying to sabotage my property. But the real kicker came the following week. I was in the middle of afternoon feeding when I heard voices near the old maple grove, the same spot Amelia had gushed about for her wedding photos. There was Victoria, in her designer boots completely unsuited for farmland, with a woman carrying a professional camera and a tablet. "The tent can go here," Victoria was saying, gesturing grandly. "We'll need to clear some of these trees, of course, but imagine the lighting. And we can set up the catering station, Dad." "Excuse me," I called out, causing both women to jump. "You're trespassing on private property." The wedding planner, a woman named Diana Reynolds according to her business card, had the decency to look embarrassed. Victoria, on the other hand, just gave me that artificial smile. "Mr. Thompson." Perfect timing. I wanted to discuss the logistics for get off my property. Each word came out like ice. "Now, Alex, may I call you Alex? I understand you're playing hardball with the negotiations, but this is getting ridiculous. The wedding is in 4 months, and we need to start preparations." I pulled out my phone. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm calling the police to report trespassing unless you leave right now." That's when her mask finally cracked completely. "Listen here, you stubborn mule," she snarled, all pretense of civility gone. "Do you have any idea who I am? Who my husband is? One phone call from me, and I can have every agricultural inspector and health department official crawling all over this dump. I can make your life very, very difficult." "Is that a threat, Mrs. Blackwood? Would you mind repeating that while I record it?" She stepped closer, jabbing a manicured finger at my chest. "This is going to happen, whether you like it or not. I've dealt with plenty of stubborn property owners before. Ever heard of adverse possession? If we can prove continuous use of the property, Daff, is that why you've been sending people to trespass? Trying to establish a pattern." The wedding planner was already speed-walking back to her car, wanting no part of this confrontation. Victoria's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. "You're making a powerful enemy, Mr. Thompson. Last chance to do this the easy way." "The easy way would have been accepting my no the first time," I replied. "Now I'm going to turn around and walk to my house to call the sheriff. If you're still here when I turn back around, I'll be pressing charges." As I walked away, I heard her designer heels squelching in the mud as she stormed off, followed by the sound of her luxury car's engine roaring to life. I waited until I couldn't hear it anymore before letting out a long breath. That evening, I sat at my grandfather's old desk, looking through the property documents he kept meticulously organized. Victoria's threat about adverse possession was nonsense, but something about her confidence with property law bothered me. The way she'd mentioned dealing with stubborn property owners before. I opened my laptop and started digging. Victoria Blackwood, previously Victoria Monroe, former real estate agent. And there it was. A small article from 6 years ago about a real estate license revocation due to fraudulent practices and misrepresentation of property rights. Well, well, well. It seemed like Victoria Blackwood had a history of trying to take what wasn't hers. As I saved the article, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Thompson, this is Amelia Blackwood. We need to talk. What my mother's doing isn't right. Can we meet tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long moment. Either this was another one of Victoria's tricks, or things were about to get very interesting. Looking at my grandfather's old photograph on the wall, I could almost hear him saying, "Sometimes, son, the best way to deal with a storm is to let it blow itself out." But this storm was showing no signs of slowing down. It was about to become a hurricane. I met Amelia at a small coffee shop 2 towns over. She looked different from that first day at the farm. No designer clothes, no perfect hair. Just a young woman in jeans and a sweater, clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline. "I'm sorry," were her first words. I had no idea how far my mother would take this. I never should have mentioned the wedding photos. But Amelia had more to share than just apologies. She pulled out her phone and showed me dozens of emails, correspondence between Victoria and various real estate agents, contractors, and even a lawyer specializing in property acquisition. Her mother wasn't just planning a wedding. She was orchestrating a full-scale takeover of my farm. "She's done this before," Amelia said quietly. "It's why we moved here. The last time, it didn't end well." The next day, I took everything, the emails Amelia forwarded me, the documentation of Victoria's past real estate license revocation, the recorded threats to Liam O'Connor, a reporter at the local news station. His eyes got bigger with each document he reviewed. "This isn't just a neighborhood dispute," he said. "This is a pattern of systematic harassment and attempted fraud." The story broke on a Tuesday morning. HOA president's property scheme exposed. History of fraudulent claims resurfaces. By Wednesday, my security cameras caught Victoria trying to remove all evidence of the Community Gardens Initiative sign she'd planted along my property line. But the real fireworks came at Thursday's emergency HOA board meeting. I wasn't there, but according to Patricia Walsh, who served on the board, it was spectacular. "Did you or did you not lose your real estate license for similar actions in Riverside County?" Board member Richard Torres demanded. "That was a misunderstanding, Victoria started. "A misunderstanding?" Another board member interrupted. "Like how you misunderstood that Mr. Thompson's farm isn't part of our HOA. Or how you misunderstood that you can't sell property you don't own." Victoria's resignation wasn't voluntary, but it was unanimous. The new board's first action was to issue a public apology to me, followed by a certified letter confirming that my farm was private property with no connection to their association. But the real surprise came 3 weeks later. Amelia showed up at my farm again, this time with her fiancé, David. "We're changing our wedding plans," she announced. "We're having a small ceremony instead. No huge venue needed." She paused, twisting her engagement ring. "But I was wondering if we could still take a few photos here. Just us, no party, no tents. The maple trees are beautiful in spring." I thought about my grandfather, about his belief in doing right by people, even when they hadn't done right by you. "The trees bloom in late April," I said. "You're welcome to take photos then." Amelia burst into tears and hugged me. David shook my hand, explaining they'd moved their wedding to his parents' backyard and hadn't invited Victoria. The following spring, I watched from my porch as Amelia and David took their wedding photos under those maple trees. Victoria's sleek car drove by twice but never stopped. Sometimes karma works in obvious ways, like losing your position and reputation. Other times, it's more subtle, like missing your daughter's wedding because you couldn't admit you were wrong. These days, things are quiet at the farm. The new HOA leadership keeps their distance, though they did formally recognize my property's historical status in their records. Patricia Walsh brings her grandkids by sometimes to see the chickens, and I've even started hosting educational tours for the local elementary school. Last week, I got a letter from Victoria. I recognize her handwriting on the envelope, but haven't opened it yet. It sits on my grandfather's old desk, next to his photograph. He always said that land was the one thing they couldn't make more of, but he taught me something else too, that standing your ground doesn't mean you can't forgive. Maybe I'll open that letter tomorrow. For now, I've got crops to tend and animals to feed. The maple trees are blooming again, and somewhere in those branches, I like to think my grandfather is smiling, knowing his land is still in good hands. As for Victoria Blackwood, word is she's moved to Arizona. Apparently, they don't have many HOAs in the desert. Sometimes the best karma is simply losing the power to make others miserable while finding yourself exactly where you belong, far away from the things you tried so hard to control. I still have the pink citation she left in my mailbox. It's framed in my barn now, right next to my grandfather's original deed to the farm. A reminder that some things aren't for sale, no matter how entitled someone feels to them. They say good fences make good neighbors. But sometimes the best neighbors are the ones who learn to respect boundaries, even if they have to learn it the hard way.